Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, the Honorable John Barry, United States Ambassador to Australia. When the ambassador was sworn in as the 25th U.S. Ambassador to Australia in September 2013, it was another great step forward in what has been a long and distinguished public service career. Prior to his nomination, Ambassador Barry held the position of the U.S. federal government's chief people person. That is, he was the director of the U.S. Office of Personnel Management, and in that position, of course, he was overseeing the work of 2 million persons in the federal government. Interestingly, previous roles before that included the director of the U.S. National Zoo in Washington, D.C. He was Assistant Secretary for Policy Management and Budget with the Department of the Interior. He was the director of the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and he was Assistant Secretary for Law Enforcement in the U.S. Treasury Department. I like to think that his directorship of the U.S. National Zoo has prepared him for his job here in Australia. Ambassador Barry commenced his term here by setting an interesting precedent. He was the first ambassador to Australia from any country to introduce himself to the Australian population on a YouTube clip, which was just great. And as you will soon hear, Ambassador Barry is surely a strong supporter of the Australia-U.S. alliance. He has described the alliance as an anchor of peace and stability in the Asia-Pacific region. I know we're going to hear more of that in just a moment. And in his role as ambassador, he's seeking to increase bilateral trade, investment, deepen cultural, scientific, and environmental cooperation between our two countries. He is literally just off the airplane, having been in the United States with the Prime Minister and the President, and we're very much looking forward to his remarks. Please welcome Ambassador John Barry.
Bates, thank you for that warm welcome. You know, it's a little, I don't know about you, but I find it a little uncomfortable when you're being introduced. It's almost like you're sitting in on your own eulogy. And, you know, my mom used to say when she was alive, you know, there's only a few words you really want to hear at your funeral. Look, he's still moving. So I appreciate you all putting up with that this early in the morning. Bates, it is great to be here with you. Thank you for your leadership at the Study Center. It is phenomenal. Ministers, excellencies, members of parliament, there are so many distinguished guests. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome and good morning. It is a great pleasure to be here with you. And I want to congratulate Bates and the Study Center for lining up what is really a star-studded cast that you're going to be hearing from at today's proceedings. I think it's fascinating when you look at the diversity and the caliber of all of the people not only that you'll be hearing from, but that are in the room here today. It is a true reflection of the depth and breadth of our alliance and the many ties that make our relationship so vibrant and so strong. Now, as everyone knows, President Obama announced the rebalance to the Asia-Pacific region about 3 years ago. In fact, just a few miles down the road. But it is not as if the United States ever left the region. For the majority of our history, the United States has been a Pacific power. And our enduring friendship with the people of Australia, founded on shared sacrifices and common values. Values like liberty, freedom, justice, and respect for human dignity. That has been the pillar of our vision of promoting peace and prosperity in this region. The rebalance, or the U.S.-Australia alliance, of course, has a defense component. But there is so much more that goes into maintaining security and stability, especially in today's world, where no nation can go it alone, and we need the vibrant participation of our private sector, the civil society, and non-state actors to play and help accomplish this important role. Alliance 21 has aptly captured those dynamics by focusing on the key themes of defense and security, yes, but also trade and investment, education and innovation, natural resources and the environment, energy security, and emerging Asia. Taken together, those discussions are helping to chart the course of the enduring and evolving relationship between Australia and the United States against the backdrop of a region that produces 40% of the world's gross domestic product and is home to the fastest growing middle class. Now, Bates mentioned that I just got back from Washington, where I had the great privilege to participate in the Prime Minister's first meeting with President Obama in the Oval Office, along with meetings with almost every member of the cabinet. And while I was there, and on the many-hour flight home, this visit allowed me to reflect on some of the many milestones that have occurred in just my first 9 months on the job, and the amazing opportunities that lie ahead for the remaining months of this year. We were very pleased that the President and the Prime Minister announced the conclusion and the end of a very long and serious negotiation on a new force posture agreement that will be addressed and signed formally at the Osmond meeting later this year. And that agreement not only secures, but it advances the initiatives that the President discussed in 2011. And it is a critical step in maintaining our flexibility and our interoperability for our military forces in the alliance. This year, we increased the rotational presence of our U.S. Marines in Darwin. They are now at about approximately 1,100. And we continue to step up our level of cooperation between our air forces at the same time. Australia's assumption of the G20 presidency and the UN Security Council are perfect example of Australian leadership on the global stage. Of course, both of us are ramping up for the G20 Leaders Summit that will occur in Brisbane in November, and the President will be again visiting Australia at that time. I was recently in Brisbane and met with the incredible team that is planning this summit, and you can imagine how many moving parts are involved with this. But they are outstanding individuals, and I am convinced that this summit is going to be an extraordinary success. The meetings that lead up to this are often much of the work, actually, that is accomplished with the G20. And already, Treasury Secretary Lew, Federal Reserve Chairman Yellen, visited in February for the G20 finance ministers and the bank governors meeting. The Prime Minister met again with Secretary Lew while he was in Washington. Next month, the U.S. Trade Representative, Mike Froman, who's also on the agenda for today, will be coming to Australia in July for the G20 Trade Ministers meeting. Mike was also in on the meeting with the Prime Minister and the President, and he is very hard at work on negotiating the TPP that Bates referred to. It is one of our highest economic security goals in this region to conclude an ambitious and comprehensive high-standard agreement that we believe can be the model for trade for the entire 21st century. It will promote growth, it will create jobs, both in Australia and in the United States, as well as the region as a whole. Hundreds of American companies operate in Australia today, some of our most successful. Chevron, ExxonMobil, GE, Citibank, Google, all have operations here, and you're going to hear from many of them today. Some of Australia's largest resource projects are U.S. investments, including Chevron's massive Gorgon and Wheatstone LNG projects, and ConocoPhillips' LNG project at Gladstone. I was very honored last month to Ambassador Ma from China and I visited the Gladstone project, which is a joint United States, Australia, and China investment project that is going to be producing over 24 million gallons of LNG on a regular basis. It is a phenomenal facility. When it comes online later, it's going to be an incredible infusion into the LNG market. But more importantly, why Ambassador Ma and I went is we both believe that it is a great example of how the future can look. if it is built with cooperation and leadership between our great nations. At the same time, as I mentioned, we're looking forward to the 29th Osman. It will take place here on Australian soil in August. In March, NASA Administrator Charlie Bolden came and celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Deep Space Network right here in Canberra, and celebrated what is a very long and storied partnership in space that is one of the most enduring examples of our bilateral cooperation, and one that there continues to remain great potential for fantastic growth. Later in this month, we will be having the International AIDS Conference in Melbourne. This will give us and our health experts from around the world an opportunity to share the best practices in what's going on in HIV/AIDS research as well as treatment. Later in November, after the G20, the 6th World Parks Congress, which only happens every 10 years, a global forum that discusses protected areas, it is going to be happening in Sydney right here in November. So you can imagine that is going to be a fantastic forum to discuss next steps in conservation of resources, climate change, sustainable development. And you saw today in the news that the President expanded one of our largest marine protected areas that was created by President Bush. President Obama will be taking that to a factor of times 10, thereby creating the largest marine protected area in the world. And I know that will get a lot of conversation at that conference. In sum, this conference takes place amid, when you listen to all of those other things, a very exciting year of accomplishments for the United States and Australia. And it seems to me that the axis of the world for 2014 has shifted to be right here in Australia. And I have to tell you, we in the United States are very proud to see our best friend and ally shine so brightly on the world stage. We have tremendous opportunities to strengthen our historic partnership, and that is what this conference is all about. So I'd like to thank each of you, especially those who have traveled so far, for making the effort to be here and to share your energy and your thoughts for the future century ahead of us. And I wish each of you well on these very important discussions.